schools! Save our 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 schools!
There's an inspirational element to people taking action, standing up for themselves, standing up for their profession and standing up for education. It's a hard decision. People don't want to be on strike. They want the government to negotiate, but they're right to take a stand, and it's great to see them doing it.
And what we're doing is we're standing up for kids' education, and it is about power. But it's also about, it's centrally about the link to the problem with teacher recruitment and retention, and that causes huge problems with workload as well. If you're having to cope with a turnover and inducting new people in all the time, and the government is running down our education. Since they were elected in 2010, there's a graph that we've got. GDP spent on education has just been falling and falling away, and we're trying to get them to change that. We are standing up for our kids' education, and you're doing that. We are going to win.
Thank you so much, Emma. I don't know how you feel. I feel quite emotional today. It's going to be a long day for me. It's going to be a long day for many of you. I was on ITV this morning. Mary was on the BBC. But across the country, teachers and support staff are rallying to a moral cause. Our action has a moral purpose. We are standing up for education. We're standing up for the quality of the education that this generation of children get. And the government has got its head in the sand. And we heard a story this morning, many of these stories. A school in Gloucestershire where GCSE maths class, 65 children in the class, being taught by a geography teacher with no maths A-level. And these stories are repeated around the country. And that's what we're here for. We do know it matters about pay and it matters about funding, but the pay matters because we haven't got enough teachers for our children. There are primary classrooms where there are successions of supply teachers doing a good job, but no permanent staff. We're here for a moral purpose to reduce the disruption in education. Yes, there is disruption today, but we're doing it to make the government take its head out of the sand and reduce the disruption in our schools. Now, they intend to rush through Parliament something called the minimum service level provisions, where they say that we have to provide a minimum service on strike days, and that if we don't, they'll fine the unions and maybe sack the workers who don't go across the picket line that the unions set up. And what I want to say to government is, what about having a minimum service on non-strike days? What about having a minimum service where there is a special needs assistant for the child who's got what needs one, where there is a GCSE chemistry class, for a teacher for a GCSE chemistry class, where there are permanent staff in our primary schools? What about a minimum service level on non-strike days? It's not about following unions and sacking the workers, it's about finding the government and sacking grant shaps, I tell you. They've got to take their head out of the sand. Because when they look at what's happening now with other unions on strike today, and they say union bosses are coordinating strike action. Well, I want to say to you, I'm not the boss of anyone in this room. I'm an elected representative of teachers, and we're doing what teachers and support staff are telling us to do, and that's true across the other unions as well. The reason why it looks like there's coordination is because so many people are being treated badly by the government, and they need to look at the fact that they need to invest not just in education, but they also need to invest in our health service. Now, what we know is that they are ignoring all of the data that we present to them. We met with Gillian Keegan on Monday, and we ran through the evidence from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which says that teacher pay has been declining since 2010 compared with other professions, and that is impacting on teacher recruitment. The evidence from the NFER, the National Foundation for Education Research, which says exactly the same thing, from an organisation called Public First, which is a centre right think tank, which says exactly the same thing. Teacher pay being declining, support staff pay being declining, that having an impact. We said to her, you have to do something about the situation in our schools. But I've got to tell you, they don't listen unless there is a threat of strike action. We don't get engagement unless we do that. We wish it was other. But for this strike today, we first started raising this with government ministers in June. We wrote to Nadine Zahawi in June saying, if you don't move on teacher pay, we are going to ballot our members. We wrote to James Cleverly in September saying it's not good enough, we will ballot for action. We wrote to Kit Malthouse in October saying we need to meet, we're going to ballot for action. We wrote to Gillian Keegan in October and in November and repeatedly since. Maybe that constant turnaround of Secretaries of State for Education tells you they don't really take education seriously. Maybe for some of them, the fact that their children are in another part of the system where it's not having these impacts, maybe that colours their view of it. But we didn't get to meet with Gillian Keegan in person until Monday, the 9th of January. And even in that meeting, she said, let's put off having another meeting until we hear what your ballot results are. And I said to her in that meeting, why is that the relevant matter? We're bringing you evidence of a crisis in our schools, that people are not paid enough and we can't hold people in the job and we can't recruit people in. Why is our ballot result the thing that's relevant to you? And I tell you the reason is they had their head in the sand and they did not believe that you would vote in sufficient numbers to pass those thresholds. That's why they wanted to have a meeting after it. They thought we would not have reached these ballot results. Now they are going to have to take their head out of the sands. Emma said she didn't know if this meeting would be, if this room would be too big. There's a huge number of people in Warwickshire on this, in this meeting today, and it's the same across the country. They cannot ignore the response that we've had. The fact that the ballot result was so strong, the fact that, and this is breaking news, that by midnight last night, 43,000 people had joined the NEU. 43,000 people who are not pressed into doing it. They made an individual decision to join it, or maybe they made a collective decision in their school. And they also can't ignore the fact that Mumsnet yesterday revealed a poll that 62% of mums on Mumsnet are supporting the action today. Worried about the disruption it causes to their children's education, but supporting the action because they understand the argument that we're making. Government can't ignore that. We don't want to strike again, but we do have to tell government that we would strike again, because they don't listen unless there's a threat of strike action. So they have to believe that we would do it again. But the next day of action isn't until the 28th of February, and that gives us time to do other things, and other things that you can really help with. We are going to start the biggest program of engagement with parents, with grandparents and carers, the biggest program of engagement we can with politicians between now and the 28th of February. And if I was the government, I would be very worried about that.
Yes.
If I was the government, I'd be worried about a repeat of the 2017 general election. Theresa May called a snap general election in 2017. It's faded from our memories. She thought she could increase the size of her majority in that snap general election. She lost her majority. Why did she lose it? In a major way, it was because teachers and head teachers started talking to parents about school cuts, and 750,000 people changed their vote because of what they thought about school cuts. If we can engage with parents between now and the 28th of February, and my goodness, the people in the room, you've got the skills to talk to people. It's what you do all day. I mean, sometimes they're younger people, but it's also, you're always talking to people. You know how to do it. And many of you primary and special school teachers, you have regular daily contact. There are parent governors to talk to. There are chairs of parent-teacher associations to talk to. There are the parent who will say something on the Your Group WhatsApp group and get other people to join in. And we can get parents to put pressure on this government like they've never seen. We can make us an offer before February the 28th. That's what they have to do. They have to turn it round, so that we aren't running our children's education down year by year, running your pay down year by year, reducing the number of teachers coming in year by year. It's time for them to stop, and it's time for them to realise they must invest in our country's future, and they must invest in this generation of children. They will tell us that we're disrupting education. And we have disrupted education today, and we sincerely regret it. This generation of children had their education massively disrupted during COVID. We did our best during COVID to avoid that. But this generation of children had their education massively disrupted. But there is disruption every day in our schools, and they are not dealing with it. They appointed Kevin Collins to give them a recovery program. He gave them one. They ignored it, wouldn't spend the money. There are GCSE classes not having a maths teacher, not having a GCSE chemistry teacher. It's happening every day. They are responsible for the disruption in our schools, and we are trying to put it right. They'll tell us we can't afford it, and we say we're not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but we do know the last Chancellor of the Exchequer knows where to find some money on tax evasion and tax avoidance, and they can deal with that. We also know this notion of unearned income. The income you get for being a teacher, you earn it by the sweat of your brow. There is also unearned income, the income that you get for dividends on stocks and shares that wealthier people tend to have more of. If they equalised the rate at which they taxed unearned income with earned income, that would bring in £14 billion a year, more than enough for everyone in the public sector to have a pay rise which matches inflation, which would put money in their pockets, which they could spend in the private sector. Our country's going into a recession and the government is getting it wrong. We're going to have the worst performing economy, even worse performing than Russia, behind the sanctions, for goodness sake. They need to invest in all of us. And you are part of telling them that they have to invest in this generation of children and in education. You are doing a fantastic job. You're doing a moral job. We need you to talk to parents arising from this. We want every parent to know what's really happening in schools. We want them to start putting pressure on politicians as well, because we don't want to take that next day of strike action. But I think it's really vital that we also tell government that we are, that we can, that we will take more if we need to, that they actually have to get their heads out of the sand and they have to invest in our schools and our colleges and the people who work in them. Thank you very much for everything you've done today. This is an amazing meeting and it really matters.